So let's talk about this. You were the first in the United States to perform poem, and it occurred very shortly after Inoue performed the first case worldwide. Tell us about this historic moment and about how this happened.
Yes, serendipity at play again, because I mean you really can't make this thing up.
Right.
Because I was 2009. I had moved to Winthrop October of 2007. So at the end of 2007, I moved to Winthrop from Columbia as the chief of endoscopy. And what happened is I was at DDW, and I have this Greek friend, John Katsogridakis, whose idea for a vacation is going to a live course around the world. So every year he goes to, 10 or 15 of them. He has been doing this since the 90s. So he's been every year to Amsterdam, Düsseldorf, Hong Kong, Toronto, the NYSG, DDW, the European meetings. Like that's what he does. Like, so 10, 15 weeks a year. That's also his vacation. He's at some live course, and he would ingratiate himself to all the titans there of endoscopy. He would show them videos of some EMI he did, and he came to know them, because if you see the same guy accosting you every live course you go to, like you see them at Düsseldorf, then there they are in Amsterdam,
right?
Then they are in Toronto. So who is this guy? You start thinking that another faculty member, right? And he keeps showing the stuff he does, and he's very affable. And then they got to be friends with all these people like Neuhaus, Costamagna, like his buddies, Repizzi, all the who is who, and also from Asia, Joe, the Koreans, So he literally knows all of them. And then his wife is a painter, so she started doing portraits of these people. And then he got his own live course in Athens every 2 years. Mm-hmm. Where he would have a gallery exhibition of his wife's works with the portraits of these famous people, like Inouye and Jerry Way. Wow. And all these famous people. So he got to be like one of these patrons of advanced endoscopy. I don't know what else to call him, because he doesn't do much of this stuff himself. He's like in private practice in Athens, but he loved this stuff, and he was always in there. And to the point where, when Nib Sohindra retired, they had this small get-together in an Amsterdam pub, there, and Katsogridakis was invited. He flew from Greece to Nib Sohindra's retirement party in Hamburg. So very connected in there. He invited me to this. So every year at DDW, he would have this amazing dinner in an amazing restaurant, like some restaurant that you can't get a reservation for months, quite apart from getting one during the DW. But he had this, concierge service in Brussels. I don't know how much he was paying for that. That
wow.
Could find a restaurant anywhere at any time, for the right amount of money. So anyway, he had this dinner at this sushi restaurant in Chicago, which had just opened, called Truth, TRU. I looked it up recently for the interview. It closed its doors, unfortunately, 2 or 3 years ago. But it was one of the top sushi places there. And so he invited these famous people, like every year. It would be for all his famous friends. And I got in there because we met 3 years before at NYSG, and I got in because I'm his friend, not because I have any fame or anything. I brought my wife, and I brought Alberto Larghi. I don't know if you know Alberto Larghi. He wasn't that famous himself at that point. Now he's famous. He does that big US course, Alberto. He was, he trained at Columbia. He was a fellow when I wasn't attending there. And then he, went to Italy and joined where he's from, and he joined Costamagna's group. Mainly as an EUS guy. That's his claim to fame. And now he does this international EUS course. But I brought Alberto because, I ran into him at the W2009. I'm like, let's go to this dinner, this great dinner that Katsogridakis has. So we went there, Inouye is sitting next to me, literally. I remember it like it's yesterday, like right to my left.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's Ponchon from France, there's Yamamoto, famous people. So I'm talking to Inouye, Professor Inouye, what are you presenting at the DW? So like, at the video forum, I'll show this procedure, this hair myotomy done through the mouth. So I go, oh my word. And you find the muscle fibers and you cut the circular only. What? I'm like, okay, I got to see this. So you described it all in great detail. So I probably would have gone to the video forum anyway, but this really made an impression. So yeah, 2 days later at the video forum, he presented literally the video of his first poem. Obviously the audience was blown away. And I was blown away. So that was like April or May of 2009.
Uh-huh.
So then more serendipity, because then, in August of that year, I'm like on a sailboat, literally, in the Aegean. I almost didn't answer the phone with my BlackBerry. So it rings as like a Long Island number. So there must be some console, but I'm away, so who cares? Then I'm like answering, it's this General GI, Dr. Chris Dimitriou, of Greek descent in Long Island. I was like, I have this young guy, has achalasia, just diagnosed. Can you do a pneumatic dilation? Which, I can tell you, this is the first time in my advanced endoscopic career, which at that point was almost 10 years long, that I was consulted to treat an achalasia patient. Because this is not considered, at least at the lab, it wasn't considered advanced endoscopy.
Right.
The motility person would do the dilations. But, this general GI guy was afraid of perforations. Like, why don't you do the dilation? You're an advanced guy. If something happens, you can put a stent, whatever. So that was patient number one. Because I saw him in the office. I'm like, initially I was about to say, no, I don't do that stuff. Then I'm like, oh, well, hold on. And then I'm like, there's this procedure I saw at DDW. The guy, the referring guy, like, yeah, whatever, do your thing. Bye. I'm busy. So I saw him in the office. I explained, there's this procedure. I haven't done one. Nobody has done one in the U.S. But I can save you from surgery. Which for young men, the balloon doesn't work. It's the one demographic that has been proven that pneumatic is not as good for.
Right.
That everybody would send them for Heller. 42-year-old man, healthy.
Uh-huh.
So I can save you from a Heller. I haven't done a poem, but I've done for the last 5 years a similar procedure called DSD. So I think I can do it safely. So the guy's like, yeah, sure. And then I went to the IRB. That's the good thing about Winthrop. So I went to the IRB, which is run by the chairman of oncology, was the chief of the IRB, who then talked to my chief of GI, Jim Grandel, big academic pancreatologist. So my chief is like, well, since he came here, he has been doing all these crazy transluminal biliary stuff, which at that point had picked up after 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't hurt anyone. And this is really very advanced, dangerous, high-risk stuff. So he does it very thoughtfully and hasn't had complications. So if he says that he can do it, if we can have a surgical backup and do it appropriately. So then they talked to the chairman of surgery, who was this, I'm not going to say any names, but he was like his late 60s, very crusty, old-fashioned surgeon who has been trying to stop me from doing my biliary axis stuff for the 2 years I was there. And then he said, absolutely, I will not provide backup for this crazy poem stuff. And mind, it wasn't called poem. It was, I don't know, the initial name was submucosal flap myotomy. I don't remember what, it's what I called it on my case report, instead of poem. So he's like, yeah. He said no, but then the guy that was the chief of the bariatric center, which was the best MIS surgeon, was like, oh, it's okay, I'll cover for him. I'll be there. So then the IRB's like, fine, if you do the first 40 in the OR, with the patient prepped for surgery on their back, and with the surgeon, prepped for surgery too, and being in the room. So that was the conditions. And the first case, the surgeon was actually scrubbed with sterile gown and sterile gloves for the whole case. So anyway, so that's how it worked, and we're able to proceed with the first poem.
Wow, it was an endoscopic submucosal myotomy.
That's what we called it. Yeah.
I just looked up the reference.
I was also loyal to Gostad because he was calling this procedure SEMF, submucosal endoscopy with mucosal flap. If you read the first publications of the Apollo group, they invented the tunnel. It was called SEMF. So I kept that name, but then he came up with poem, much better name. It kind of screwed me a little bit because I keep telling people I published the second case report in the world and the first case report obviously in the US. It's like if you look for the keyword poem, you're not gonna find. You have to put myotomy or
right, because this was before the term was coined.
Right.
So then, how did you prepare for this case then? Because we were talking about preparation.
Oh yes, Well, immediately before the procedure, we took those portable file cabinets, but open at the top, and we put folders for any possible bad scenario. So if there's a bleed, I had 3 or 4 folders, like injection needle with epi, hot forceps. So bleeding has like 4 folders with each equipment in the folder, ready to go. And then, what if it's a perforation? So there's like 2 folders with different clips. Then there was, other stuff for perforation closure. So, it was like, that was the immediate preparation, like the days before the procedure. But also, what I did is, I went to the Toronto course 2 or 3 weeks before. Must have been September, October, because the poem's like October 9th. So, so it was like 2-3 weeks before it was the Toronto course. So I went there, but I was trying to go anyway, because I didn't do it for the poem. It was my second time there, because it was great. They would do 5 days with, 100 live cases, continuously.
Wow.
By the best in the world, Japanese, Europeans. So I went once as an advanced fellow, and then this was my second time, I think 2003. So I skipped a year, and then this was the second. So at the reception, Gostad was there. I'm like, okay, let me pick his brain, because they did the first poem, except in an animal model, because he came up with a tunnel as a notes technique for safe exit into the abdominal cavity or the mediastinum. They published like doing mediastinoscopy and lymph node sampling using the tunnel in the esophagus. So they came up with a tunnel for various uses for nodes. But then, the lead author, I think, was Pasricha, because he was the motility guy in the Apollo group. But they took the tunnel, but it was also Gostad's and the rest of the group's idea. But they would just assign different projects, whoever was the best, to be the lead on the project. But it was all their idea. Let's make a tunnel and cut the muscle and replicate a Heller. So they were really the first poem publication in 4 pigs in 2007, which is what Inouye saw, and then did in 2008 his poem in humans. And then, I took courage from Inouye and did my first human poem in 2009. But, so like, let me talk to the guy about, tunneling and myotomy. So he said something that still holds true. It's like, well, you don't need to, it's going to be difficult to only cut the circular, and it doesn't really matter. Just cut all the muscle, no problem there. Which, how I still do poems. So he was right about that.
Full thickness myotomy, right?
Yeah, do full thickness myotomy. And then the other thing I didn't do, fortunately, is, you know what works great for the submucosal dissection, because ESD is so tedious. You can take those little silver CO2 canisters that they use to blow dust off electronics, and connect them to a injection needle. Put them in the gun, then connect the gun to the injection needle. And I found I didn't like that. And then blow it through the needle, and it will just dissect the submucosa like instantly.
Yeah.
So I bought them and tested to see that I could make the connections work and whatnot. So I brought it to the OR. But then I'm looking around me, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be kosher. So I'm like, yeah, no, let me hold off onto this and try something else. And I tried, I didn't do dissection of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
I tried the way Pasrica did it in the pigs, which is they made an incision in the mucosa and then they jammed in bluntly the CRE balloon, and then they inflated it to 10 or 12 millimeters to make the tunnel, and that's how they made the tunnel. I'm like, okay, I'll try that. So I did that. Like, I made an incision with the flat knife. I put in the balloon, like gently, I dissected bluntly, and then I dilated, boom, and there's 5 centimeters of tunnel immediately. And then I put the scope at the end of that tunnel. First, I forgot. First, I pre-injected the submucosa through the entire expected run of the tunnel. So I started in the cardia, and I used that Erbi white catheter that goes through the Erbijet pump and injects the submucosa aggressively, but without making a hole. Because I didn't want to make a hole in the tunnel. Because I'm like, I want the tunnel as intact as possible.
Right.
Then it doesn't matter if you make a little hole with an injection, but I use the non-injection Erbijet catheter, where you just touch the mucosa and it blows through and injects. So I started in the cardia and injected backwards all the way to 10 centimeters above the sphincter. Mm-hmm. Then I made a cut with a flat knife. Then I put the CRE. Then I went to the end of the tunnel. I pushed the CRE another 5 centimeters. So 3 dilations, and I was in the cardia.
Right.
So very fast tunnel, still the fastest in the database. I have like a database now of poems that is 800 poems. It's the fastest tunnel is poem number 1. Kind of ruins a little the learning curve date. but it was, and then, other people around the country. So I published the first case as a case report with this method. So let me tell you, for at least 2 or 3 years, all these surgeons that started after me, a lot of them were using the balloon. Like, it was definitely the Oregon group with Lee Swanstrom. They were using this balloon method. And to the point where, I saw him at 1DW. I'm like, I don't use this after the first 3. Because the problem is, the case number 2 and number 3 didn't go as smoothly, interestingly. The balloon, perforated the muscle or perforated the mucosa. It's very hard to ensure, especially if there's fibrosis in the submucosa.
Sure.
The balloon may not go only into the submucosal layer. It may veer off to the muscle and split it. It may do things like that. So after point number 3, I gave up on the balloon and started using the flat knife to do the dissection. But the first one, we did the balloon, and then we used the flat knife for the myotomy. 3, I was very scared, so we did only the sphincter. So it was 3 centimeter myotomy. Even though the tunnel was 15 centimeters, the myotomy was 3 centimeters which, mind you, this patient did fantastic for 7 years. Okay, didn't dilate his esophagus, was eating normally. At 7 years, like in 2016, he started getting symptoms. I went down, it was kind of tight. So I'm like, okay, fine, you deserve a modern poem now.
Right. So
I did a second one, but he did great. It was, the surgeon was amazed because he called me that night and it freaked me out because I had to go to some dinner. So I'm at the dinner and he calls me at 10 p.m. I'm like, oh my God, patient has mediastinitis or something. So I answered the call, like, what happened? What happened? No, he's fine. He's just watching TV. I wanted to tell you, I'm amazed. The guy has no pain. Because apparently after I had him out of me, you have a PCA pump or, prosthetic. He's getting there like no pain. He feels like nothing was done. He wants to go home, actually. So he was very impressed by this surgeon. Because, he also did Heller. He was the MIS/bariatric surgeon. It's like, this is amazing results. So he did great. So, yeah.
How long did the first poem take?
Not long.
Not so long, right? Because you had a
the
really
tunnel was, I don't know, 3
dissection.
minutes, and then the myotomy, who knows, 3 centimeters
Yeah.
even with me going fiber by fiber, which I was, asking the surgeon what he thought. But you think that's still muscle, right? Not aorta. I'm like, I don't know. I've never seen the muscle this way. So I think it's muscle. That was the conversation. So like fiber by fiber. So I think it was an hour and a half. If you want, I can check the database. I'll tell you exactly how long it was. So total poem duration 105 minutes.
Not bad for your first case.
No. It wasn't bad.
Faster than your 2 centimeter gastric ESD.
Yeah, much faster. Yeah, no, that was pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
So it's with a flat knife. Actually, the length of myotomy was 5 centimeters. I guess it's not like 3. And the length of the tunnel was 9. I used the flat knife.
There you go.
So yeah, 105.
And then you presented that at NYSGE, or you had your fellow present.
Yes, no, that was really amazing because people didn't know what was coming.
Right.
We said, a novel treatment for achalasia.
You kept it purposely vague.
Purposely obscure. So the funny thing is, we start presenting, and initially there's the usual whisper, and people, talking about different things. And then when the incision in the mucosa happens, dead silence. I mean, what's he doing? What is he cutting there? That was like, when was it? Yeah, 2009.
Yeah.
People didn't even understand ESD then. So they see a knife cutting the esophagus. Like, what's he cutting there? And then the balloon goes in. I'm like, wait, what is he dilating? So anyways, it was like literally you could hear a pin drop for the next 5 minutes. And then the moderator was Larry Brandt, he has a personality. He's a bit of a character. I mean, he's notorious. He's the chief of GI at Montefiore, where, weekly there's an intense pimp session for the fellows. Cases were presented. And then good luck. It's like being back in grade school and trying to hide behind the first row so you don't get picked on. So anyway, when I found out that he's the moderator, which was a few days before, I told my fellow who was going to present, go read Schlesinger and Fortan cover to cover on achalasia. Because the question will have nothing to do about the poem.
Right.
It would be like, manometry studies show that, the longitudinal fibers are important. Why didn't you cut them? Or something like that,
Right.
You just read all of Schlesinger, because it can be some minutia about achalasia. But I think we stopped laughing too, because he just asked questions about poem. The first one being, how can you tell what's longitudinal and circular fibers? Which, now we know it's very visible.
Right.
But nobody had looked at things that way before. But his first words were, he was in the back of the auditorium listening. I think it was at Memorial or Mount Sinai Auditorium. So then at the end of the point, he kind of runs down the steps to the front with a point, and he's like, Dr. Harris, I can only say you went where no man has gone before. I'm like, okay, I guess there won't be any pimping. So anyway, he enjoyed it. I mean, he's a very innovative guy himself, and he's like, I guess he understood the significance even then of this.
Yeah, no, I think this is significant for so many different reasons, and quite honestly, I've always kind of wondered, as part of this historical consideration series, whether I should have also interviewed him to see if he still remembers going to your presentation and what his impressions were about the impact of this on GI as a field.
Right. But he remembers. It was a pretty memorable presentation.
Now, I think one of the biggest impacts on the field that people may not realize are a couple of things. One is that that you performed the first poem in the United States as a gastroenterologist, in fact, whereas Inoue was a thoracic surgeon. Tell me about the subsequent adoption of POEM in the U.S. I know that it took a little while before POEM became within the realm of gastroenterology. I think even now there's a little bit of a split between GIs and thoracic surgeons who do POEM. How was this received by the surgical community, and kind of how did you subsequently influence the field into having this adopted by GI? I know there's a lot of proctorship along the way as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was very important for my US GI colleagues that the first person to do it in the US, in fact, in the Western Hemisphere, was a gastroenterologist, because the adoption was not super fast. Like I kept in my early lectures on POEM, I kept a tally of which was the new center that started and what was their approximate volume at that point. So so basically, even 3 years later, in 2012, there were, obviously I was the first year in 2009, and then there were like 3 centers only after me, all in 2010. And then there were like 5 centers in 2011, and then there were 6 centers in 2012. So there were 13 centers after mine by the end of 2012. So it was like, it was gradual adoption. But let me tell you, until 2012, excluding Hopkins, which started in 2012 with Kassab, every other center after me was either a surgeon or a team of surgeon and gastroenterologists, but led by surgery, really, the team. So, literally the next person after me, about 4 months later, was in UCSD, was Santiago Horgan, who's a surgeon. And then in August of 2010, about a year after me, was Northwestern with Hangnes, also a surgeon, which is interesting because Northwestern has all these big hitters in achalasia like Carillas, and Arnef Pandolfino was there in 2010. But it's obviously one of the big centers for achalasia. But the surgeons led the way. The surgeons exclusively did it, maybe until recent years. And then it was the Oregon Clinic with Liz Wanstrom, a surgeon, and then Bay State in Massachusetts. Again, Deslets was the GI, but it was led by Romanelli and Earl, who were the surgeons. And then Case Western, Marks and Ponsky, of POEM fame, of PEG fame, the inventor of PEG, surgeons. North Shore, Ujiki, a surgeon. Then McGill was this woman, Vasiliou, she was a surgeon. Then Stanford was a surgeon. I'm blocking on his name. But a surgeon. So you can see everybody else was a surgeon for the next 2 years. And some of the surgeons were very vehement about this not being done by GIs because, they cannot handle the complications, quote unquote. So this is and you know what? Some patients would tell me that too, to be honest. Like, I saw this surgeon in the city before seeing you, and he's saying, GI shouldn't do this because you can't handle the complications. I'm like, well, look at it this way. Do you want somebody who does endoscopy as a hobby, half a day a week, doing it, where if they get complications, which they might because they are much less experienced, they can fix them? Or you want somebody who does endoscopy 5 days a week and is very unlikely to have a complication, but if they do, they need to have a friendly surgeon to fix it. Like, which one would you prefer? Obviously the win-win scenario is get it by somebody who does a lot of advanced endoscopy and is less likely to have an adverse outcome, and then have a collaborating surgeon who can help out if this happens. But anyway, the first few years, though, there was a big of a debate going back and forth.
Sure.
Including a memorable debate at NOSCAR where there was a bit of a, spat between a surgeon at the podium and a famous gastroenterologist in the audience. having at it to the point of saying, yeah, that's what you guys were saying about colon polypectomy too, and that you wouldn't let us do a polypectomy, and look what happened now. And these are all just the usual tropes about, oh, GIs cannot handle this, they shouldn't be doing it. So anyway, but in the end, things prevailed. But it could have gone easily another way.
Right.
With this kind of mediastinal surgery, if the first 5 people, or 6 or 7 or 8, in fact, were surgeons, and I wasn't there.
Right.
It's questionable.
So I figure you probably took it very, almost like a personal mission, that in order for gastroenterology to adopt POEM, you needed to make sure that you proctored as many gastroenterologists as you could, both in the U.S. and outside the U.S.
I think, make the best man win. Right. You have some surgeons, thoracic surgeons, that do 2 or 3 days a week barontology, EMRs, and things like that. They're very good. I proctored Steve DeMeester, who is a very well-known thoracic surgeon of the Meester dynasty, the son of Tom DeMeester. So he's an incredible endoscopist. So I tell you, I had a lot less fear when I was proctoring him on his first 2 poems than some gastroenterologists. Not to mention, I proctored another team of a gastroenterologist and a surgeon. Yeah. And the surgeon was doing a much better tunneling than the gastroenterologist. So, it's all, who's the safest and best operators. I proctored both, but the first year, 2012 was a hurricane of activity. Like I don't know how many miles I did that year, but it was a lot. So I started, my very first thing was an invitation by Costamagna, which in 2009, where I was an unknown person. Sorry, that was to 2012 now. In 2009 to 2012 was a bit of a dead period, because there were only other pioneers that were almost like after me. Like the first proctorings where people asked me to come and help them was the early adopter phase. Mm-hmm. So there were a bunch of surgeon pioneers that just saw my videos and asked me a few questions and then went ahead. Right. So these were like, UCSD, Northwestern, Oregon, Bay State. Although Bay State, I think Romanelli came down and watched me do some poems. Case Western, North Shore in Chicago, McGill. Yeah, so those people, they just went by what I published and the videos. And I don't know, maybe they brought Inu too, some of them. Instead of bringing Inu, they brought Inu, thinking that, he's the first practitioner and he's a surgeon. Right. So, and he would go to every SAGES meeting, so they knew him. So they may have invited Inu. So my first proctoring was in 2012. So the first invitation was at the Costamagna Rome Live. Uh-huh. An iconic course back then, but mainly for ERCP, because Costamagna obviously is a maven on that. But anyway, I did a poem there with Horst Neuhaus assisting me. Mm-hmm. For a little guy like me, this is like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by the titans of endoscopy. I was like, big, very heady days. Right. And interestingly, because of this invitation, had to postpone the C-section for my daughter by a week. Oh. Which the GYN said it was okay. Oh. I'm like, look, this is an invitation to Rome to perform a live poem with Costamagna and Neuhaus on those holy monsters of endoscopy, right? Uh-huh. So can we? It's like the GYN, it was an academic GYN at Sinai. It's like, yeah, no problem. Oh my God. So I'm like, okay.
Did your wife forgive you?
Yeah, no, I bought a Bulova jewelry from Bulgari jewelry as a peace offering on the way back from Rome. I also took one of my nurses from Winthrop to Rome to assist me. Right. Amazing nurses, amazing tech. So Tashina, an amazing nurse at Winthrop, came with me to Rome to assist on the live poem. So yeah, and then I went to Shanghai with John Day, like two or 3 day trip to Shanghai, like boom, like for the weekend. Shanghai for the weekend. My gosh. So and with I don't know, 100 degrees with 100% humidity, wearing a suit in a hardly air-conditioned hospital. But I presented poem data because Joe had started doing it literally that year, no, 2 years before, in 2010. Ping Gong Joe started, highest volume in the world, though, 300 plus poems a year. So,
Wow.
so he invited me to discuss my survey of poetry in the world. We published the survey with Tom Salvidis, the International Poem Survey, and the white paper that presented those. And frankly, I went to see how he does like a 8 or 10 minute poem, because I saw at the DW that year in April of 2012 his poem presentation, and the median duration was I don't know 30 minutes, and the range was 8 to I'm like 8. That got to be maybe 18.
Right.
So I went up, was like, that's an 8 minutes. It's like yeah. How great! So I had to see that. And I didn't see an 8-minute one, but I believe I did see like a 15-minute one, which was very impressive also. So and then it was literally that year I proctored like 5-6 people. I proctored. I went to Hopkins, and we did a lab and grand rounds, and then a live poem in their endo unit. And then obviously the Mister. Who else? I had Kahela come to my lab at Winthrop and do a whole day in the lab, and I proctored him and his advanced fellow. In 2012. I mean, really, there a lot of activity in terms of proctoring. And then I proctored the Indiana people came twice to observe. Like one, John DeWitt came first, and then it was DeWitt and Al Haddad. Then I went to Geisinger and proctored 2 poems by David Deal and also their surgeon.
And you went to Athens too, right?
I went to Athens.
Yeah.
The summer of 2012, we went to Athens. Me and Inuri did the first 2 poems in Greece, in a government hospital, and the moderator was Charlie Lydale, interestingly. And Dimitri Koumaros from France, which an advanced endoscopist from France, but they were moderating the case, and John Day was there too. He was assisting, and that was with a hybrid knife. Finally. We had knives after 2011, so I used the hybrid knife, which has been my knife ever since.
I see. And around that period of time, that's when you also started Long Island Live. So take us through Long Island Live, how this began, and its subsequent claims to fame.
Yes, interesting. Long Island Live. I started it immediately after I went to Long Island, because the previous 2 years we had managed to put together live courses. This was like the first live courses in the U.S. Like the previous 2 or 3 years, we did 2 live courses, just me and Pete Stevens, doing basically really advanced ERCPs. On those live courses. I mean, back then it was the hot thing was selective cannulation for cholangiocarcinoma. Like, don't inject everything, and learning Marty Freeman. I went to a course that he had in 2005, I think, and he's like, you got to know your segments. So when the wire goes in, well, no, you pick what you want to drain on the MRI, and then you just pick that segment and you put the wire there. So this is like hot news in 2005, 6, 7. So we did live courses showing all this anatomy and how you do it. And then when I went to Winthrop, I said, let's do a live course. So, but initially the first year was just lectures at the Union Dale Marriott on ERCP, malignant, benign, biliary stenting. So it was me, Frank Gress, who always lived in Long Island, but at that point he was at Downstate in Brooklyn, And Atul Kumar was from the Stony Brook system.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the Northwood VA, part of Stony Brook. So so we did this CRCP US course, so 2008 was the first year, but then by 2010 it had morphed into a third space course. So, and then by 2012 it was exclusively it was third space with, if available, other new endoscopic technology that was of an endosurgical nature. So 1 year, for example, maybe early, like 2013 or 2014, Chris Thompson did the first sleeve gastroplasty in New York for sure, like in 2013 or 2014, live, okay, and a stoma reduction. And then I had the group from Indiana come one time, like Glenn Lehman and somebody did this, I believe the Medicus, this stapler that used ultrasound to make sure that the tissue had been adequately compressed before firing staples to create a fundoplication. So it was really, and then I had Binmaler again, 2013, 2012, do a GJ, which hadn't been done in humans yet, with a cold axis. Well, it wasn't even called an axis. Wow. It was called like Exlumina. Right. It was his company. So I'm like, how am I gonna do that? And I was a little apprehensive about doing it in a patient. Thank God, because GJ is where things go wrong even now, right?
Right.
Where you could open the stent and be looking at fat even when you are an expert. So I'm like, why don't you do it on a live pig? So we did a live GJ on a live, but transmitted from the Winthrop Animal Lab on a live pig. And then he did a coil embolization of a gastric varix. And it's amazing the cases I would find just for the live course.
Right.
How often do you think gastric varices come that bleed? I don't know how I found that one, to be honest. God provides. So anyway, I had a little smattering of endosurgical technologies, but 90% was POEM, ESD, FTR, and the core faculty was Joe, inventor of EFTR, in 2011. Inu, obviously, the man, the legend. And then Yahagi, essentially co-inventor of ESD. And I started bringing, a little later, like the last 4 years of the course, or 5, I was bringing Katzenvoy. Because you know what? Katzenvoy showed up as an attendee one year. And they came into my room, typical Sergei style, and started giving me advice about how to do things. So I'm like, you know what? Next year I'll bring you as faculty. And let you show how you do it. Okay. So that's what happened. Same thing happened with Haber. Haber came 2 years as an attendee. The first year I didn't even know about it. I just see him in the audience suddenly. I'm like, let me bring you up to moderate. He's like, no, it's okay. I'll try to be in the room. So Haber came, and then the last year of Long Island Light, 2021, as I was leaving Winthrop, he was the moderator. It was COVID, so I did 4 cases by myself that Haber was moderating. E-Poem, ESD, Z-Poem. And then at 5, we piped live cases from Asia, which worked perfectly because it was 5 a.m. there.
Right.
So I did my live cases until 5 with Greg moderating. Of course, Greg was there moderating for, I don't know, approximately 14 hours.
Oh my
gosh. We were bringing him stuff in the boardroom, intermittently snacks and drinks and whatnot. But that doesn't faze him. The guy is legendary endurance. So then we had Joe. Joe piping live from his OR a transgastric cholecystectomy, like a true notes can transgastric cholecystectomy blast from the past, from circa 2007-8 when people were trying to do that, but live on a human, and that was like he said his 40th.
Wow.
like with a hook knife and
Yeah.
envelopes for the cystic duct and clips on the cystic artery and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And then Yahagi, pat some duodenal ESD. And Inui, was it a POMF? I think so. So yeah, really cutting edge node stuff.
Right,
But it
right.
worked nicely that they were doing it from their place, because doing a transgastric cholecystectomy at Winthrop, I don't know. I probably would have required an IRB.
Probably.
Even a POMF at that time.
Oh,
probably.
interesting. Uh-huh.
So anyway, it's just everybody, all the early adopters, grew up on Long Island Live. I mean, they were.
Yeah.
Like, I have pictures of everybody that Othman came, and everybody around the country was either watching remotely or was there. Also on the hands-on that we had on Saturday. The live cases were Friday, and the lectures on Saturday was a hands-on with the masters, where the only instructors that were allowed were these titans. We did not have, other people teaching that were training themselves. It was like only all the faculty was Joe, Yahagi, Katzenvoy, me, and Gostout doing the teaching. And it was very low ratio, like basically 20 people for these 5 masters for like the whole day. So it was
Wow.
great stuff.
Yeah.
So it was very sought after. Very sought after. And, it all went online. And why you took it down, but you can still find it on YouTube if you search
Yes,
properly.
absolutely.
And you can find it on Broadcast Med has some of it archived on their site. And it's free, but you got to register there. But Broadcast Med have also some recent ones I did. I did one from Georgia, from Archbold, 4 cases with myself. So hopefully I will reinstitute it now.
Yeah.
The thing is, there are live courses now, but they the way they do it is they invite people that are not necessarily the inventors or highest volume people.
Right.
And that translates also into plate safe cases where, you do a poem, but not a poem on somebody that had, 3 Hellers and 2 balloon dilations and is end-stage sigmoid.
Right.
You just do a poem on, a semi-regular poem. And same thing with the SDM-FTR. So it's a bit different, the way. So I think there is a need for Long Island Live, because, he said that this is the course. I mean, I put this as a quote on the brochure of the course for the latest years, because this is the course with the most challenging third space cases in the world, live cases.
Right.
And people do live challenging cases, they just don't do them live.
Right.
And Gostout said that this is the one course that shows where endoscopy can go to in the future and deliver amazing results. So it was, unique in the level of difficulty of the cases. Also on the fact that we would not switch to another room when things got difficult. We would actually switch into the room where the things got difficult at.
Right.
That's the importance of having masters doing the cases. Because not only they don't get frazzled by being live, but this is what allows them to show the real magic, which is how you get yourself out of a tight situation, because that shows what your level of skill and tricks and techniques that you have. So it was it was important in that respect, in showing that what do you do when things get difficult. So people loved it. Vargo told me one that DDW, ex-president of the ASG, he's like, and sometimes instead of watching Netflix, that was like six years ago, I just watch episodes of Long Island Live, because you had these difficult cases, so the operator is like thinking out loud, like I do that all the time. I'm sitting there like, do we go this way or that way? And then the response comes from Chris Gostout, who is, excellent. Being a color commentator, mixing in the jokes with pretty solid advice.
Yeah.
And you can't get anything past him, interestingly. Like, you hit it a little mucosa there, almost perforated it. You're not gonna he's not gonna miss it. He's gonna get you too. It's like, oh, what happened to the mucosa there? And then you have to say, oh yeah, there's this, that's, and then you have to explain how you'll deal with it. So he can't really get away with it. So anyway, so it was a very fun back and forth. Apart from the technical details of the case, it was really a very, very fun back and forth between Gostad as the moderator and Kumar was the co-moderator. He was like the straight guy, like the Gostad was the comedian and Kumar would play the straight guy. And it was like a great dynamic in terms of bringing out all the educational aspects of the case, also in a pretty fun way.
Yeah, no, and I think that's always been one of the great highlights of your career too, is having this amazing course that we all have come to, that we all have seen at some point in our career. Now, poem actually, interestingly, achalasia being a rare disorder, and poem doesn't really change that fact, but poem has had a very outsized influence. Like it's almost like I'd say it's had a much bigger influence than what you would expect from achalasia as a disease alone. The impacts have been far-reaching beyond just achalasia. And, I think it has to do with the fact that this really was the first successful, true, notes procedure. Right? Tell us about the impact that poem had on the field and on notes and on subsequent endoscopic surgery.
Yeah, I think that is the revolutionary aspect of it, is that people are trying to find notes in big organ resections outside the stomach or the rectum or the vagina, like removing the gallbladder, removing the distal tail of the pancreas, removing kidneys, adrenals. It's all. I mean, I did an adrenalectomy at a live animal lab at Temple in 2016 after poem, and the pig survived. And I did it with a little tunnel in the distal esophagus. The right adrenal is right there in the pig, and I removed it like it's a gist. I removed it like an EFTR of a gist off the pole of the kidney. So, but this shows notes like in 2016 when I did that versus notes in 2005, 6, 7, when the pioneers of traditional notes were trying to do it. These people probably had never touched an ESD knife before.
Right.
We're trying to do a cholecystectomy. I actually took a notes lab at Harvard, I think in 2007. And I remember the teacher at my table was Bill Brugge. So we're trying to do a transvaginal cholecystectomy in these pigs. And predictably, I'm trying to get through and end up in the rectum, which is a terrible no-no,
Right.
Because it's right there. And, so anyway, so people were actually having notes hands-on labs for people like me in 2007. So people really thought that, it's going to be the next frontier after laparoscopic surgery. But you had all these people that didn't know how to do endoscopic surgery because they'd never done ESD, they'd never done POEM. The first time they used a hook knife was trying to remove the gallbladder. That's not going to go well, really.
Right.
So this is what happened. So you had all these developments, but you didn't have a critical mass of endoscopists that could do endosurgery with knives and suturing and all the implements of surgery. So it stalled because it was incredibly difficult with this equipment and without the proper experience. But then POEM comes around and shows that you can do sort of notes light by operating near the wall, not going and removing some organ, but cutting the sphincter, cutting the pylorus, removing maybe a little myoma with a tunnel. So suddenly, notes succeeded. Like you could do a notes version of a very well accepted iconic surgery, the Heller myotomy, faster, safer, less pain, faster recovery. All the ideals of notes were delivered right there.
Right. So
that was like revolution. So finally notes succeeded with POEM. Not the traditional notes of deep incursions into the peritoneal cavity to remove a real organ, but still, it's notes.
Right.
So that is beginning. I hope, or I think, is beginning to bring us full circle, where now we may. Well, the next revolutionary aspect is it finally got the Americans to adopt ESD.
Yeah.
Because they were not very happy with ESD.
Right. It's an unintended consequence.
It's what?
An unintended consequence.
Yeah, because nobody wanted to do ESD apparently until 2012, 2013 when POEM came along. Because they probably were looking at the Japanese doing it and was like, this takes hours. It's like so difficult to learn. There's no payment for it. Like, it's just stalled. Okay. Like, other than Sergey, myself, and Maynor Antion, I don't think there was anybody else doing ESD really until they all got excited by POEM. And they were like, okay, POEM is ESD. Let's have a look at this ESD thing. And then they started doing the rectum, and then they got, slowly they got the appetite. We find some kind of billing workarounds, so it all came around. So there's definitely in the US, it's like the put the cart before the horse. Like they got interested in POEM, then they went to Japan to look at that, then they said, oh yeah, ESD, right. So then they went to ESD. So that was one revolutionary effect of POEM, that it finally brought ESD in the US. And then ESD really brought endoscopic surgery. Because with ESD, you do suturing, you close perforations, then you do intentional perforations with the FTR. Then suddenly the tumor resection got escalated to surgery. Node surgery, like EFTR with open perforations that are intentional.
Right.
And now, hopefully, in the future, by what we see with what Joy is doing in China and whatnot, like appendectomies and cholecystectomies and things like that, which were all the iconic procedures of traditional nodes. I mean, what started the nodes field going was Nagi Reddy doing an appendectomy transgastrically and bringing the appendix out the mouth. I mean, that video really kick-started traditional nodes back in, I think it was 2004, 2005 when he showed that video. And boom, nodes was formed because of that video. But now Joe's doing appendectomies and cholecystectomies. Now you may be at the hundreds for cholecystectomies. So we're coming back full circle, right? Because now the taking a gallbladder out doesn't look such a daunting task.
Right.
If you have done a 4 or 5 centimeter cyst in the proximal stomach, the difficulty of dealing with a gallbladder is not really more than that. So that's a revolutionary effect in many fronts. First, it showed that nodes is feasible. Then it brought ESD and endoscopic surgery into daily practice. And now we may go back to traditional nodes.
Absolutely.
And revisit that.
It also, to shift gears, it also served to inspire a new generation as well. And, it's funny that you and I both still remember this, but the response that you had to Yahagi's multi-hour live ESC in 2003 was the exact same response I had when I came to interview with you for Advanced Endoscopy Fellowship in 2016, watching you take out a 10-centimeter lesion from the cecum, a multi-hour adventure, and then going up there and suturing it all up, all the way through the afternoon into the early and late hours of the evening. And here I am 8 years later trying to do the same to inspire my fellows. So in many ways, I think, this really served as a you talk about critical mass, right? It's like creating a critical mass of endoscopists and of inspiration and of mentorship in endoscopic surgery in the United States and around the world. Tell me a little bit about, inspiration and mentorship, actually. For that matter, tell me about becoming a good mentor. I think you're quite well known to be a very inspirational and a good mentor. Tell me a little bit about this.
Yes, well, that's an interesting question. I mean, how can you be a good mentor? I mean, just believe in, leading by example and showing your trainees and mentees that this kind of enthusiastic involvement with your work can succeed. That's these days. This is, I think, the most important thing.
Right.
Because the question is, there are so many inimical forces to doing something you love if it doesn't immediately produce big revenue and is reasonably low on resource utilization, which of course is the opposite for both.
Right.
High resource utilization without huge revenue production. But how to sell this to all these, people counting the beans and watching everything, and how to do it, and also how to do it and have some semblance of family life and life outside work. This is like this is where this is like okay, I can teach you how to do traction on the ESD, but I think more important is that you can follow your enthusiasm and do a lot of ESDs every week, like say 4 or 5, and still have fun and have basically the hostel buy-in and have your team buy-in.
Yes.
And make reasonable revenue. So this is like the most important thing, because they have this contagious enthusiasm, which is the same with everybody that loves what they do. Like they attract people that see this enthusiasm and want to have also the same kind of enthusiasm. So it's just a contagious enthusiasm that all it needs is fertile ground to blossom. So you get somebody who is good with their hands, and they see that, I'm like, oh my God, I really, this guy's having so much fun every day. He wakes up in the morning and thinks, what fun do we have today? Oh, 2 years, poem after a failed together, and you're like, oh my God, I love this day. So this is contagious enthusiasm, and it transmits to the nurses and the techs, because you all encounter a problem, and the techs are giving you suggestions like, oh, why don't you use that traction method you used on this other case last week, and why don't you do it this way? And then it's a team, and it's a team project. It's like trying to solve an escape room all together, and that's every day. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So I think that's leading by example and with enthusiasm is I think the best mentorship model. At least the one that fits me.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
The other mentorship models, because I tell when I interviewed advanced fellows, like, okay, you're gonna see things that you're not gonna see at any other program in third space endoscopy. But on the maybe I told you the same thing. But I'm like, I'm not politically connected. I'm not in committees. I don't know people that know people. Okay, people that know me because of my dedication to what I do. But that's it. So I might not be able to give you a leg up in a political sense, because I'm just not that type of mentor. So there are other models where, you provide the mentee with access to societies and committees, and which, for better or for worse, academic success. I mean, I followed an academic success pathway that went through enthusiasm and scoping from 8 to midnight. And that's probably a difficult approach to academic success. It requires the right opportunity. It requires serendipity. It requires, being in the right place at the right moment to do something different that nobody has thought of, And then there's the pathway of, networking.
Yeah.
So, which is a more, you find the proper mentor, that appears a bit more predictable pathway than my pathway. But that's what I used to tell advanced fellows during the interview, because they interview at other places where the mentors are very politically up in the ladder and connected, and they have a lot of clout. So anyway, but that's my mentorship model, because I don't have access or to this kind of political connectivity. So I will give you the tools to be happy doing amazing cases, you and your team, day in and day out, and have a happy life.
Yeah, and I think to that on that note, and I actually very much resonate with that, is that your work speaks for itself. And even my wife, who has come with me to watch courses and stuff from time to time, has always pointed out, it's like, yeah, Stavros guy, his work definitely speaks for himself. You could tell when he holds the scope, you can tell exactly what he's about to do. Like that's the mark of someone who knows what they're doing. It's like it is so beautiful that you can see exactly what you're about to do next, and you can kind of see it in your mind what he's thinking. And I think that speaks volumes to your accomplishments and to your technical prowess and professional success. And I think it also says a lot that even to this day, your original team from Winthrop, you still hang out with them from time to time in New York City, right? And that I remember you showed me pictures that they would go out of their way to come out and join you in courses in far corners of the world, even.
Yes, that's true. Like one of my techs came to Greece on her own dime to assist me on some live cases in 2022 after I had left Winthrop. And two of my techs came to Georgia, where I was working transiently for a year and a half at this Southern Georgia hospital called Archbold.
Mm-hmm.
They came for a week each on their vacation to work with me, so that the nurses and the techs there get a training in how I do things. Not to mention that the nurses and techs there were amazing also.
Right.
We just got those 2 weeks with my techs, and by the time I left a year and a half later, I mean, we had done probably 65 esophageal poems in the middle of Southern Georgia.
Uh-huh.
And over 100 DSDs or something. And they were like amazing. They could handle the dilumen, the traction, the hybrid knives. They were like very, very, very amazing. That was like a 2 week a month kind of situation. So it's just a testament to just commitment to the work and enthusiasm, drawing in other similar-minded people and creating a critical mass where everything. And we did 2 live courses in that year and a half from my new hostel in Southern Georgia. We did the Archbold live in my first week there. It's a little crazy. And then we, April, like basically 10 months later, we did an ASG live for Kaleja. We did a poem live as part of ASG live, where there was a poem from Hopkins, a poem from Chris Thompson in Brigham, and a poem from Archbold by me, with different techniques being demonstrated live. Mm-hmm. And this was the stuff in Georgia. The first live course, my tech from New York was there too. It was a week there. So it's we have a very good relationship. Like every month or two, we go to dinner. Mm-hmm. Also, with the nurses and the techs and my colleague Dr. Modeo.
Yes.
She did 2 advanced years with me, Rani. Mm-hmm. God bless her soul. And she survived them and thrived, and she's the poem force behind the database and the publications, because it's a huge database. Somebody has to follow the patients, and she's held by an amazing memory. Like I can throw a name out there, and she'll remember not only if there was an issue with the poem or what the issue was, but also that patient's whole social situation. They're married, they're not married, how many kids they have. It's an amazing kind of memory. But she's obviously my collaborator for all the poem studies. So we go to dinner, compare notes about what's going on at Winthrop these days, and it's an amazing group of people.
Yeah, no, and again,
But
that's
and to be honest, the
yeah.
nurses and the techs I have now at South NASA also amazing. So I don't know if I'm incredibly lucky, or if just this kind of enthusiasm attracts properly minded people, and I never get to work with somebody who is unenthusiastic.
Yeah, and I think I think it's the latter, because I've noticed the same as well where I work, that that enthusiasm is very contagious, and it's something that that's what gives nurses and techs the difference between a salaried day, or a day where they're counting down the hours, versus a great and personally professionally fulfilling day. I think that's what makes a humongous difference. And so
I want to believe the same thing.
Yeah.
Because everywhere I go, people percolate that are just so amazing that I'm like, okay.
Right. I think it's one of those things where you kind of bring out the best in people. You kind of bring out the A team in people, in terms of what they can do. When they see stuff like this, they want to try to assist you. Right. And I think this kind of leads me to kind of closing. That's thank you so much. This has been a truly wonderful and deeply insightful interview. To kind of close out, I ask this of every person, which is for your personal advice and wisdom. What advice do you have for future generations who wish to be as bold and as pioneering as yourself?
That's a good question. What advice to give? Because society changes, the world changes, so God knows if this advice is going to be relevant in the future.
Well, you gave a fantastic answer in the manuscript.
Well, yeah, I think you should always go with the classics, because those, humanity sometimes forgets the old wisdom, but only at its peril, because it will reinvent it eventually. So I think the most important thing for doctors is the ethical part of what we do. Okay, and obviously nobody better than Hippocrates. I guess that's why his words have survived the test of time for thousands of years. All of these modern attempts to dilute their meaning, or I've heard of new versions of the Hippocratic Code that have nothing to do with the original. I believe that these are not the best versions.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Hippocrates said basically, you should do no harm, and this survives as the best aphorism, or not the best, the most quoted one. But it's also, to me, it always sounded the most evident one. I'm like, yeah, of course. But as a doctor, you realize what he was getting at, which is,
right.
Yeah, no, of course you'll try to do no harm. But, there are some situations where, if you think about it, it applies.
Yeah.
And then there's, keep the patient's confidence. Don't reveal what you find from the patient. Which, obviously, that's HIPAA compliance 2,000 years ago. But then I think the most important thing that it gets mentioned less and less these days, and it was there. Hippocrates did say you should provide compassionate care to patients without regard to their ability to pay.
Uh-huh.
It's there. It's in the Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah.
But somehow people feel more and more comfortable about saying, well, this is going to cost too much, so we have to do something somewhat inferior because it's more cost effective. So clearly here, pay influences a care decision, which is explicitly was in the Hippocratic Oath that you shouldn't make decisions like that. So I would tell young physicians to just heed to that, because the way they are trained, they don't even understand this aphorism anymore. Like, of course you have to make a business plan for how to introduce TSD in your practice, or of course you have to make XRVUs, and therefore you have to do endoscopy in a way that generates them. It's all about money, more and more, and to the point where the young doctors, they just don't understand that this used to be a taboo in medicine.
Right.
Okay, in the 70s or 80s or even 90s, it was taboo to advertise as a physician. Like marketing was taboo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are in a vocation similar to a priest. You shouldn't really advertise your wares like some salesman. Of course, this has disappeared. So marketing is right along the business plan and the cost effectiveness.
Yeah.
So like that's interesting. So give care without regard to ability to pay. Yeah. I mean, you can think that doing this in the extreme, obviously, how would that work? I mean, money is required to buy equipment, money is required to run a hospital, but still, the physician should be guided by this principle, I think. So this is important. Then the other thing Hippocrates says is that life is short, but the art is long. Mm-hmm. Okay, we put that in Greek there.
Well, how do you say that in Greek, by the way? Because I know it's in the manuscript in Greek.
It's these words, interestingly, most of them have roots in English, so you may be able to remember it. So the first part, which life is short, is Ovios. O is an article, Vios is life, and that's where biography comes from. So Vios is life, and biography is the accounting of somebody's life. So Ovios, Vrachis, that's where, for example, brachytherapy comes from, means short. Ovios Vrachis means life is short, and then but the art is long, the art of medicine, you were saying. So Ovios Vrachis is there, which means but, techni, like technical, the art is techni, is long, makra, is the techni makra. That's where macro comes from. Makra means long long or big. But in this case, long. So Ovios Vrachis techni makra means the techni makra, which means life is short, the art is long. So you have to constantly be learning as a physician and not stay stagnant in terms of the state of the art, because learning never ends. And then finally, some life advice I got from a pediatric gastroenterologist. I have to say I didn't follow that one very closely, unfortunately. But he remember, like he died in 2021. But this pediatric physician, he was famous in defecation issues in children. Interestingly, that was his claim to fame. So an academic pediatric GI that dealt with that aspect of gastroenterology. So he had 5 kids himself or something, 5 kids and many grandchildren. So he would see me like basically 8 to midnight in the endoscopy unit at Winthrop, where he was the chief of GI. So he's like, Stavros, just remember that no one at their deathbed wished that they had worked longer hours. That stuck to me, because that's probably true. They probably all regret what they didn't do with their families at home. So, but did I follow it? Not very well, because I only have one daughter who is 12, and I love her, and she's really the center of my existence. But that I didn't follow that advice very well. And that's my single regret about my advanced endoscopy exploits.
Yeah, no, it's a very much very sage advice from one of the great legends in our field. So Stavros, again, thank you so much for an absolutely phenomenal interview. We look forward to seeing this being fully published, and I'll be seeing you around as always.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.